We've got the whole country here, coast to coast. I'm in Los Angeles. Jenna's in Boston, right, Jenna? Yep, Boston area. And Robin, you're in New Jersey, right across from Philly. We were just talking about that.
That's right.
All right, so we'll get started, and I'm sure more people will join us. Yep, keep filling up the chat. That's great. And really, it's just going to be our typical conversation that we have with our special guests. I told Robin, don't worry about getting a presentation or anything formal. We're just going to talk about all the things that have been going on in her world around school nursing and school health and COVID and schools back in and back out, and kind of the stories that she's been hearing. I thought you guys might like to hear from her. So I'll let Robin do a little bit of introducing of herself, and we'll just get started. And I want you guys to feel comfortable, as always, like put questions in the chat, ask to be unmuted. Let's make this a vibrant conversation with Robin while we have her. All right, Rob.
Yeah, I'm ready. So first of all, thank you, Lara, for having me, asking me. And I'm such a big supporter of ACES Connection. I have been for many years. I find ACES Connection to be my go-to resource for so many things, for information, for research, for support. I cross-post my blog on ACES Connection, and I've made some of my dearest friends through Twitter friends who are connected to ACES Connection. So Liz is here, my Twitter friend, and I know Sissy, Kathy Steinley is here, my Twitter friend. Who other Twitter friends are here? It has really enriched my life being part of ACES Connection. So thank you for having me. I am a school nurse in Southern New Jersey. I work in Camden, New Jersey, if any of you are familiar with New Jersey at all. It's a very under-resourced city that has had its own decades and decades of trauma, and definitely impacts our students, our staff, our school community. And I have been there for 20 years. So I have seen kind of the impact of trauma over time and the generational trauma over time. And so I do spend a lot of my kind of off time reading about trauma, trying to understand it, really working with my teachers and staff about the impact of trauma so that they begin to understand concerning behaviors that we see at school. So in the last few years, I have been primarily a preschool nurse, working with multiple schools in the city. I have about almost 400 students in 4 different buildings. So I travel around the city to meet with my students, staff, and families. And COVID has opened, it has shined a spotlight on every disparity that we already knew existed, but made it so much more in your face. If you don't look at it now, come on, we have to look at it. It is so in our face. And just the simplest thing, which isn't simple for families who don't have internet connection, but when we went remote in March, many of my families had no internet connection, and it makes you wonder, why isn't the internet a utility like gas and electric? Like, what have we done to people? What are we doing? Why do we as a country put up barrier after barrier for people to succeed, right? So just that as an example. I know you just told me to introduce myself and I just went, woo.
Just go. You do it.
So sorry about Liz's.
No, not at all.
Clearly I have a lot of deep feelings about the disparity, the inequity, the social injustice, the racism, the structural inequities. I do. And as a white woman living in suburbia, going to Camden every day, I recognize my, I am I want to, and I look at and I face the inequities, and I need to call them out and need to be part of some kind of change,
Yeah,
because we cannot
absolutely.
continue this way, right?
Yeah.
Um, anyway,
Well, and
that's,
that's a huge reason that we started this um, series on education in the beginning in April anyway, is to talk about all of the things that we knew were issues before and we're trying to fight against or change, and kept coming up with roadblocks, or we can't do that, or that's not possible. And, you know, high stakes testing or scheduling or not having enough school nurses, like all of these things were issues beforehand. And then of course with COVID, it was so in our face, right? That we had to be able to talk about these out in the open. So we're right there with you.
thank you.
Absolutely. So tell me, or tell us, I guess, a little bit about the most, you know, you've been very active over the last 6 months talking about the role of school nurses and school health and school shutdowns and with COVID, and you've been interviewed on CNN and the New York Times and all this. You've become a rock star, right? The voice of school nurses. We love it. So share with us some of what's been coming up for you in those conversations.
Yeah. So when so it all started when I was interviewed by the New York Times. And I want to say that the only reason I was interviewed by the New York Times is because I met someone on Twitter who referred me to the reporter. So I want to really emphasize the power of connectivity on Twitter, on social media.
Yeah.
Oh, Liz is like, yes.
Elizabeth, right? That's how we all know you, Elizabeth.
Right, that's how we know you.
Ultimate tweeter, right?
Because you, none of the things that happened with me, for me, to me, whatever, would have happened had I not been able to make some connections on Twitter. So what happened was Megan Ranney, who you may know who she is a ER doc, who I'd worked with Megan only through Twitter because of my work in gun violence prevention. And Megan, as an ER doc, has been very involved in gun violence prevention. And anyway, Megan got a call from a New York Times journalist who was interested in doing a story on schools and the impact of COVID in school. And it's very interesting. I mean, there are nurses on here, which is really great, but non-nurses may not realize that nurses are not often used as primary sources in media stories. It's been, even though there are almost 5 million of us and 1 million physicians, our voice has not necessarily been heard, especially as the source, like the primary source in a story.
Right.
The story could be about nursing, but as the primary, like the expert, the voice of expertise in the story, it's very uncommon. So sadly uncommon that there was a study done that showed that nurses as primary sources were used less than 2% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So when Megan asked if I was interested in this New York Times article, I jumped to it because I really believe that getting the nurses' voices out there is very, very important. What I didn't do was ask permission from my school district, but that's another story. And I spoke to, sometimes, you have to ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
That's right.
And the New York Times journalist was lovely. In fact, she's pretty famous in the health journalism world. I didn't know any of this at the time. Probably good. I would probably be super nervous. But when she interviewed me about school, she asked if she could tape me. And I said, absolutely, sure, you can tape me. And we spoke for a half an hour, full half hour. She only used one thing that I said, one thing. But that one thing that I said, and this is what I said, I'm just going to say it. It feels like we're playing Russian roulette with our kids and our staff.
Yep.
And she stopped the interview and she said, oh. And I thought,
yeah.
oh. I said, oh my God. Why? I thought to myself, the first thing I said, oh my God, that's the only thing she's going to use. And don't you know it,
That is.
that was the
Yep.
only thing she used. But the piece got published in the New York Times on the Sunday Times above the fold, and there was my quote.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
was like, oh no, I didn't tell my school. It's on the Sunday Times on the front page. I'm in deep trouble. Monday morning, my school called, and it was like, what have you
Yeah.
done?
Yeah.
I apologize because I think it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. But it was fine. I also always, and I do believe in my school district. I always support my school district. I don't badmouth them. While I may not agree with every single decision, I respect them and they respect me. So I didn't lose my job. You have to know your school's policy, right? So anyway, but from that quote came CNN. It got the attention of some people, and it shows you the power of a message, the power of a quote. Because I'm telling you, I spoke to them for a half an hour. I said, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
a half an hour's worth of things, just that one sentence. And that's
Yep.
the first thing that the CNN person asked me. And that's the first thing that every single person I spoke to since then asked me the same thing. Why did you say that? What did you mean by that? And I still stand by what I mean by that, because look at the circumstance that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you think, so what has been the response to that?
Well, it has definitely opened some interesting doors and possibilities. I did take that opportunity to do a lot of writing. I am a blogger, and my blog, The Relentless School Nurse, I often cross post in ACES Connection. They've been incredibly supportive of my work. And I have taken that opportunity to reach out to other school nurses across the country to hear what's happening for them and what they're seeing in their schools. And I often post their stories in my blog as guest blogs.
Yeah.
The other thing I did with that is that I started writing op-eds, and I was able to collaborate with other people I met on Twitter. I'm telling you, none of this, Twitter is an open, especially nurse Twitter, and I've collaborated with some docs too. It's a very collaborative place. And I wrote an article about the front line of COVID moving to school, like we're the next front line of COVID. And that happened to get published in Newsweek. So I
Yep.
had then a series of op-eds that were published. I had one that was published in USA Today. I was listening to Governor Cuomo, who I really do like. But when I heard Governor Cuomo say something like, well, cross our fingers that everything will go well, I wrote an op-ed that said, crossing fingers and toes is not a strategy to keep people safe.
Right.
The USA Today picked that up. So, I've been speaking truth to power is really how I can describe it.
Yep.
You know, I think I have to tell you though, the most consequential thing that happened, the most moving thing for me, because understand, I also do a lot of work in gun violence prevention. And I have felt for a long time that school prior to COVID was unsafe because of school gun violence and community gun violence. And I had a mom send me a tweet in the middle of the night, a private tweet, and she said, Robin, I only have one child left. What should I do about school?
Whoa.
Right. Whoa.
Yeah.
And
That's,
this was from a Sandy Hook mom whose
uh-huh.
daughter, she was 6, and her son was 8. Her daughter died in Sandy Hook, and her 8-year-old son is now 16. And she was deciding whether or not to send him back to school. So, first of all, I'd never met her. I'd only known her through Twitter. And I was I was hurting so deeply for her that she had to make this kind of decision. And it made me realize, like, I had been thinking a lot about school safety because when you look at the things that we're supposed to do to keep schools safe, and we've been doing a great job at keeping schools safe. It's what's happening when kids leave school, but we'll get into that later. I knew there was a piece I wasn't connecting. There was a dot I wasn't connecting. And one of the recommendations about keeping schools safe is to keep windows and doors open. But if you know anything about school safety, you're supposed to lock windows and doors, right? And when she said that to me, when she wrote that to me, all the pieces came together. This is a conversation that was not happening publicly, but this conversation is happening across the country for families that have already lost children to gun violence or school gun violence,
Right.
community gun violence. And here they're having to make another safety decision about another thing they can't see, the invisible nature of anger, the invisible nature of COVID. It all impacts school safety. So we spoke. We Zoomed, and she's a wonderful, amazing woman. Her name is Melba Marquez Green. She has an incredible foundation in her daughter's name called the Anna Grace Project.
Oh yeah, right.
And her story, what she raised to me was such a profound issue. And we, through Nelba, we reached out to a journalist that she had a relationship with at the Washington Post, who then wrote an incredible article about her family's decision, the heart-wrenching decision of sending her son back to school. It was just published a few weeks ago. I can try to put it in the chat later. It's really, really good article. So yeah, that's been my media adventure.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity though, like you said. I mean, that's what I've been really excited about, to follow this trajectory that you've had. I mean, you've been a good friend of ACES Connection, and you were on Sissy's, Zoom, Better Normal, and you've done a lot of stuff with us. But to see, so we all knew like your voice and all of, the wonderful things that you have to share. But to see it elevated to that level, and to hear other people, talking about it, and like you said, the opportunity to have school nurses' voice heard and their experience was so amazing. And I was really grateful for that, because working with schools here in Los Angeles, I feel very similar probably to your experience in Camden, especially how you described your rotation. Most of the schools that I've worked with have a nurse 1 day a week. And I'm like, well, how the heck is 1 day a week going to help identify kids that have symptom, like, what are they going to do with that? It was like I was saying before, that was an issue beforehand. If kids got—
In fact, that's why LASD, Los Angeles, right? LAUSD, right?
Yep.
That's why one of the reasons they went on strike.
Yep.
There was a school shooting.
Yes.
There was no nurse in the building.
Yep.
And I read the article from the teacher who had to attend to a student. There was no support for him. It was really the most heart-wrenching thing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I wrote a blog about that when the strike happened, and that was, I think, what I called it was something like they were striking for trauma-informed change, because what they really needed was support staff. The teachers needed, a teacher, any of us that have been to pre-service education, what class did you take that taught you how to take care of a school shooting by yourself, or, an attempted suicide, or any of those things? We are totally unequipped to deal with that. And we need a robust support staff there to meet the needs of kids and families, and the funding. Like you said, I love LAUSD is trying very hard. I'm not disparaging them. They're being dealt, right? They're funded. Their system that they're in, right? How they have to structure things. They're doing the very best that they can. And yet it's still not, meeting the needs of the community, and especially in our hardest hit neighborhoods where there's a lot of community violence, they're just overwhelmed. All the school counselors and school nurses, everyone's just feeling, they all come into this kind of position. We all, come from very caring places. We care about kids, we care about families, we want to do the best we can. And so it, like I was saying, that all of that was already there. And now we have COVID, right? Now we have this whole other layer to consider that is laying bare all of our bare threads, all of the holes, all of the gaps, all of the inequities, all of the ways the system is not functioning. So we started this conversation to like, how do we approach this, with the power that we have. And I think your story is a good example of, you used your voice, and fortunately through your connections and through Twitter and through all of, your human connection, your voice was elevated, and has made a big impact on how we have this conversation. So yeah, I would just love to hear some of the stories that have come your way. Another thing that's been on my mind lately, especially in the last couple of weeks, I remember reading that every time a school does a transition, like back to hybrid, back to virtual, like every time they make a change, it's so much worse for kids,
right,
than just sticking with one thing, even if that one thing is hard, right? LA, our whole area has been on virtual since March, and will probably continue that way through the rest of the year if I had to bet. And it's hard. I have kids in school. It's hard. It's really hard. But also the thought of like having my kids go to school for 2 weeks and then back to virtual, like that makes me even crazier. So I just love to hear kind of what you've been seeing across the country and what people have been sharing with you.
So thank you. That's a really important question. First, I want to say, yes, my voice has definitely been out there, and that has been very energizing and challenging and exciting. But I also believe that a door has opened and lots of other people are now speaking out too. And that is the point,
Yes.
right? The point is that we all have the ability to speak out, that we all have stories to tell. And those stories are human stories, important stories. So I want to encourage everyone to find their story, reach out, tell it, write an op-ed, write a letter to the editor. The power of the people is no joke. Look what just happened, right?
Yes.
Yay. The power
Yes.
of the people. We the people have a lot to say. And it doesn't just have to be a few. So if there's one thing that came out of all of this, is that I hope that door open. I see other school nurses asking great questions, getting more active on Twitter, writing, getting involved. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is a collective effort, right? And a greater good effort. So in terms of you're right. I mean, schools opening and closing is really disruptive to everybody. I think schools are trying to do the best they can in light of the fact that we have no national response, nor have we had a national response since this started. Had we done what other countries have done, we might be in another wave, but it wouldn't be up here. It would be down here. So we're now at a breaking point in many states, a breaking point of hospitalizations, a breaking point of the trauma, the collective trauma that this country, this world has gone through. I feel like we are at this point of inflection. I'm praying, we have good news about vaccines. Understand they're down the road. We also have a huge heavy lift ahead of us, those of us in healthcare, when it comes to encouraging people to get the vaccine. There's going to be a lot of pushback. There's a lack of trust. Our most trusted institutions have been eroded to the point of, starting from scratch. I just saw that the CDC, I think it was yesterday, they're beginning to get more bold about their guidance, and especially when it comes to children and the spread of the coronavirus. I don't think they're under the undue influence of this administration right now. I think they're feeling more freedom to give more accurate information. So there are positives coming out of this, but the saddest thing is that we have now that more than 250,000 people are dead in our country. The spike is just going up, and there are still people who do not believe this is real. You talk to any healthcare provider, anywhere and they will tell you how real it is. Talk to anybody who has lost anyone that they love, or people who have been sick, haven't recovered fully, because you can be a long hauler with COVID, and they will tell you that it's real. So it's very hard as a school nurse to fight when the community does not support the strategies and mitigation strategies that schools are trying to employ because they don't believe them. That's another layer of agitation and stress and unnecessary tension between schools and community, schools and parents. And that's what is very concerning to me. I'm seeing colleagues across the country in some cases where parents, they feel very much like this. On this side are teachers who feel like they're not, that school nurses are not doing enough. Somebody's saying like hitting your head against the wall. Yeah. So here's the teachers feel like, wait a minute, why aren't you sending that kid home? Don't you know what you're doing? You don't act like you know what you're doing. And then there's parents on the other side saying, you don't even know what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with my kid. I know he's my child. He has a cold. He's staying at school. I mean, so the nurse is literally in the middle. I mean, I've had nurses say to me, breaking my heart, I've been a nurse for more than 25 years and I've never felt more stupid. Right? I've had nurses say, I feel safer in Trader Joe's than I do in my own school because we don't have the right PPE.
Right.
You know, I've had nurses say, I'm at the breaking point. All I do all day is talk people off the ledge. You know, feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious, not wanting to come to work, feeling so disrespected. Now, it's not all bad news. I've also had nurses tell me that they have incredible support and that their teams have really pulled together. One theme I've heard among school nurses is that they finally feel seen and understood and heard. You know, again, with that positive also comes, nobody included me on the return to school plans, and they just told me it's obvious that somebody with no public health background made these plans because they don't make any sense. So it's just all over the place. And this would have been avoided had we had a national response.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's been obvious just as watching and in our conversations in this group every week or so, just whether we're talking about school health or, instruction or whatever we've been discussing, it's just all over the place. You had mentioned before when we were chatting, before we opened up the meeting about one source of support you have found for school nurses is a peer support group. Do you want to share a little bit about that? That sounded really interesting.
Yeah. So in every state, FEMA, first of all, for the first time in our nation's history, we are in a national emergency. This country is literally in a national state of emergency. So FEMA funds have been dispersed to every single state. And some states use some of that funding for counseling. In New Jersey, there is a group called New Jersey Hope and Healing. And it is peer support for many different topics. So for example, I run 2 groups for school nurses. There's groups for teachers, and these are all peer support. So a teacher's leading a group for teachers. There's the school nursing groups. There's people who are recovering from COVID. There's parent groups for parents whose kids were supposed to go away to college but didn't. That's a tough group. There's educator groups, so anyway, that's one way that New Jersey is trying to address the tsunami of mental health issues because of COVID. And so in the peer groups, they're private, they're confidential. I never give names. All I have to do is give a number of people who attended, and we sit and talk for an hour, Sunday nights at 7 and Monday afternoons at 3:30 about what people are going through, what they're feeling, trying to work on really, strengthening, working from our strengths also, so that we have some community-based solutions to go along with our many issues. And that's helpful too. What can we do to make it through this. You know, there's nothing like kind of, you know, releasing the pent up stress and anxiety, and letting it sit somewhere other than in your body, right? Letting it leave your body and maybe sit on the table for a while. And so that's the goal. The goal is peer support to recognize what is. And for nurses, and I know there's also non-nurses here, we are not often asked, "Are you okay?" We're
Right.
really asking, right? We're not usually answering.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a it's also not a comfortable place for most nurses to be on that end of it. We'd much rather ask than answer. Um, but oh, somebody's saying I'd like to share. I don't know. I didn't follow the chat too well.
That's okay. That's okay. We got it.
But anyway, so these groups I think have been super helpful. I think they seem to be supportive. People come back, not always the same people, but that's also good. And it's kind of a drop in and drop out. And you know, I think what it also does is it breaks down the stigma of asking for help. You know, it breaks down the stigma of saying, you know what, I'm not okay. And maybe I do need to talk to somebody. And in nursing anyway, that's always a very tricky line. And, you know, nurses are kind of built to be, I hate to say it, but sometimes like machines, but we're not machines, we're people, and teachers too. Um, and especially in school, school is a place, it's like a, what is that, a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Right, things in school are so magnified. Yes, and women too. I think that Liz just said that. Schools are magnified places. Things that happen in school, if they happened outside of school, you wouldn't blink about them, but somehow in school they take on way different meanings. And you know, school's a very consequential place because we are responsible for other people's children. I don't think it gets more I don't think it gets more you can't be more responsible than that.
Yes.
Being in charge of other people's children,
Yes.
you know, and really at their most formative years.
Yeah. I mean, as a parent, like when you, especially when you first send your kid to school, right? You're just like, you know, I'm handing you my
My
kid
life.
heart,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm giving it to you. Be gentle, you know. Exactly. It's terrifying and exciting too, but you're right. I mean, we put a lot of responsibility and have a lot of expectations of school staff to keep our kids safe. And I was also thinking about what you mentioned, you know, a lot of the conversations we've had in this group are around self-care. And I think it's true for everybody that joins us, you know, teachers, school counselors, school nurses, like this group isn't used to worrying about themselves, even though we, you know, we keep putting forth that message, right? You cannot be there for everybody else unless you take care of yourself. It's impossible because you'll burn out. Like eventually you're going to run out of steam. And so we keep trying to have that conversation about it because everyone's like, yeah, that's a great idea, but
How do you do it?
it's a great idea, but you know,
But,
all the things that come
but
after.
don't give me one more thing to do. Will you stop giving me stuff to do? In fact, I was with my Rutgers students last night. One of them is on here. Hi, Jackie. And we were talking about, I personally, for so many reasons, have a really hard time with the term self-care. I find it turns people off. I find it somewhat judgmental, like you don't do enough self-care, so really you
And look at where you're
are a
at. Right?
failure. You failed at your own self, right?
Yeah, we've been using the term collective self-care.
So I like well-being. I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like if I can look at well-being as a less judgmental. It's semantics. I know it's really
Right.
the same thing.
But it is important.
But if you can call it something that you can accept and not reject as, oh, don't give me one more thing to do. I just, you know, if you know that for your well-being, it helps your well-being to move your body 30 minutes a day, but it doesn't all have to be at the same time.
Right.
That's different than saying For your self-care, you must do 30 minutes of, make sure you get those 10,000 steps on your watch and blah, blah. Oh my God, that's just way too much, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, last night we did an exercise, just spending, I don't know, Jackie, was it like 5 minutes? Appreciating our hands. That hands are so underappreciated, especially in people whose lives, who are givers and work with their hands. And it was it was just a moment of really going through some steps to appreciate our hands.
I love that idea.
I'll do it if you guys want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do it? You
We're up
ready?
for anything. We're ready.
For anything? Jackie, you do it with me again? Yeah? Okay. Wait, let me get out my. You didn't know we were doing this, did you, Lara?
I'm game for anything, Robin.
Okay, good. It doesn't take long. Of course, I have to find it first, right? So, oh, good. Okay. It's just a few minutes of appreciating what we have. Okay. I'm ready.
All right,
Okay.
go.
Okay, here we go. So I don't have to see everyone. You can leave your cameras off. And guess what? You don't have to close your eyes for this at all. You actually keep your eyes open for this. Okay, good. Somebody loves moisturizing your hands. Okay. So sometimes it can be really helpful to bring awareness and gratitude to everyday things that we take for granted. And clearly, nurses, social workers, teachers, parents, women, caregivers, I think we take our hands for granted. These are our most powerful tool, right? Besides our brain and our heart, it's what we do with our hands. So I want you to join me in this. I hope that, that you'll find it as helpful as I do. And just join me. We're taking this chance together. Nothing's going to hurt, I promise. I never hurt anybody. But I want you to look at your hands, put them up in front of you, and really, really look at your hands. And then I want you to rotate your wrists back and forth. Just turn them gently and become aware of the sensation of what that feels like. And then I want you to clench and unclench your hands, and really clench and unclench your hands. And I want you to feel what your hands feel like from the inside out. Try to feel what they feel like from the inside out. Clench, unclench, and clench your hands. And I want you to notice, are there any sensations or pulsations or vibrations within your hands? You're moving those fingers. Our hands do so much for us during the day, so much for us that we don't pay attention to. And we rarely take the time to appreciate them. So what I want you to do now is become aware of each of your fingers. Look at the front of your hands. Become aware of each of your fingers. See each of them. Really look at them. Look at your knuckles and your nails. Look how long your fingers are. Look how they are in relation to each other. Then turn your hands over and look at the palms of your hands. Look at the lines in your hands. Really take the time to look. See if you can bring some gratitude to what your hands have done for you, what your hands have done for those who you care for, what your hands have done to serve the people that you work with. And see what it's like to inhabit and really appreciate your hands. Really, really look at them. And as you do, you may just find that other parts of your body actually begin to relax. So let your attention rest in your body just for a moment before we move on to the next part of our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. That was great. And you're right. Like when you said, I was following along and then I was like, oh, other parts are starting to relax a little bit. My shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. Our hands.
Yeah. I wanted to, Kathy, you had a really great comment when we were chatting before about people preaching self-care without changing the structures that exist. And I really appreciate that because I think that often goes along with our conversations around resilience too, right? We want you to be resilient, but not in the face of inequity. We're not just asking you to grin and bear it, right? We want you to take care of yourself, but we also have responsibility in setting up systems that support that. And I want to make sure to pay attention to that because I think that's absolutely a huge part of the message. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm trying to think. So if you guys, we have, let's see, let me look at the time. Okay, we have about 15 minutes. So if you have specific questions for Robin, this would be a good time. We obviously have no problem just chatting.
I can't believe we only have 15 minutes.
I know, that's what I told her. I was like, we never have to go the whole time, but we always do. So if there's really something you'd like to know about before we're done, now would be a good time to put it in the chat. I think for me, I would be curious, based on everything that's happened in the last 6 months or so, what do you see looking forward?
You know, for the first time, I see hope. I have not felt hope. And I will get political in this moment, but I have not felt hope for almost 5 years. I have woken up every single day for 5 years, for 4 years, and said, I can't believe this has happened. I can't believe this person is president. I can't believe racism is, white supremacy is ruling this country. I mean, it has been really terrifying. So for me, I feel hope. And I feel this huge weight has been lifted. And I'm going to do everything in my power to move along with this wave of hope because it's so easy to get caught in the spiral of negativity. I do believe in the power of the people and I feel like when you find your tribe of people who are like-minded, we can make it through this, right? And this time, I think it's taught all of us that our country has deep divisions, but we need to see each other's humanity. And I think I see people who do not look like me every single day at work. And I see their humanity, and I hope they see my humanity. And that, our country is in deep need of healing. It's going to take a long time. And these wounds go way back 4 years. They go back for centuries. We know that. And it's time that we start addressing them. It's time that we call it out, that we say what is, that, who, I guess the question is, who do we want to be? Who are we as a nation? We lost our way. And this time that we've just been through has just shown, the underbelly of society. And it's been shocking and horrifying. And so I feel like we have a chance to right this wrong, right this ship, do this important work, but we have to look at our own implicit bias too. We have to look at our own trauma. We have to heal from within, and I know that once you start doing this kind of work, you see the world differently. There are a lot of traumatized people in high places making horrible decisions. You can see it, right? So I see hope. I feel hope. And that I haven't felt that for a long time. So I'm going to stay with that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I'm with you. And Kathleen brings up a really good question. And this has been, I think, a big question from the beginning, and especially since the fall. Is it better for children to be attending school from a health and emotional viewpoint? Why and why not? Like this balance between their mental health and all of the benefits they get from being in community, and then their physical health. How do we balance those needs?
Yeah.
Really hard as a parent of teenagers, and I think in schools, like what have you been thinking about with that?
So my school, kids need to be in school because school's the heartbeat of a community. School is the soul of a community, and kids do need to be in school, but we need our communities to be safe. Schools, I just wrote a blog post about this, and I called it something like, after the last school bell rings, the safe social bubble bursts, because adults are making really unsafe decisions for their kids around social activities that then impact school. So school kids do need to be in school. I have to tell you, school doesn't look anything like we've ever imagined it. School looks more like an ICU than it does a school. And that's very sad to me. The fact that we need to have an isolation room in school, it makes you want to cry. You know, the fact that everyone has to wear masks and stay 6 feet apart, that's not how school is a social place. School is a loving place. School is community. And until this country cares less about eating out in restaurants and going to bars late at night.
Mm,
And I hate to say it, I know people love sports, but sports and then the after parties and the gate and tailgating parties and the house parties, we school is not feeling very safe. And
mm,
so what you're seeing of schools opening and schools closing, well, I do want to say one thing though. You know, learning continues. Learning did not stop in March when the buildings closed. Brick and mortar buildings had to close. Some have not yet reopened, and they may not because they are antiquated, because we have not invested in our children, because we have not invested in buildings, because we have not invested in what needs to be done to keep people safe, right? But learning has continued. It looks very, very different. I completely agree. And the overarching goal is everybody wants to get back to whatever the better normal is going to be, right? Um, but we also have this invisible virus that little by little we're learning more and more about. Clearly, there's some sense of this virus that is airborne, or we would not be in this circumstance that we're in. They're a little bit afraid to talk about how airborne it is. Um, but you know, I agree. It's not all of this. Every what's hardest in a school day, or what's most complicated in a school day, are those times of transition, right?
right.
Anybody who works in a school knows things are great during instructional time, but man, put people in the hallway, send kids to recess, send kids to lunch. Any transition time is where accidents happen, fights happen, problems happen. It's those transition times. We are in now 9 months of transition,
Yeah.
at home, at school, not at school. You know, our whole life has been turned upside down. So while I am 100% behind us being back at school, it's very hard to maintain the safety protocols that we need to maintain, and very disheartening that when that last bell rings at the end of the day, kids flip off those masks, 10 kids pile into a car, everybody's going out for pizza, they're going to a party, you know, Friday night. Like, what's the point?
Right.
You know, we cannot bubble wrap school and then not think that the rest of the community's bad decisions are not going to seep into the building. And
Yeah.
that's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
Just like the hospital workers, the healthcare workers, crying, saying, people, you're making these choices, and 2 weeks from now you're going to be in our ICU and we don't have beds for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's that butterfly effect, right? The butterfly that flaps the wings, we feel that butterfly. Or if that butterfly doesn't flap their wings, we feel it here. We are all connected. And until we get that message clear, you know, what I'm doing here in New Jersey affects you in California,
Yep.
you know? And
Yep.
School is not an isolated entity. We are the community. So
Right.
if the community is not well, school is not going to be well.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point for sure. Yeah, it's such a challenge to think. I mean, I had to go to Wisconsin for a family issue and it was terrifying. I'm so worried about, and like a lot of the behaviors that you described, it's a university town and what's going on up north in the bars. And, you just, all of our friends in healthcare I feel like are trying to yell from the rooftops as much as they can. Um,
Cry from the rooftop.
yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
rightfully so.
Yeah.
What are you expecting of people? We're not machines.
Yeah.
We're breaking.
Yeah. And just
Yeah.
to see, I think in a little bit here in LA, I've been in a little bit of a bubble because it has been the same message from our administration locally since the beginning, and people are really following the rules around where I am. I forget that it's different. Like the
Different
community,
parts of the country is
yeah, are
very
really, really
different.
different
Yeah.
in how they're responding. I think thinking forward, like so if Biden Harris came to you and said, Robin, we're going to give you an appointment
I
and
love that.
decisions and guide us
Oh,
along
please.
what we should do if we're really thinking about schools as a better normal, as changing things, right? When we go back to school, which has been the point of our conversations, what would you do?
I would focus on everyone's emotional well-being. I would Maslow before I bloom. I would not be worried about standardized testing. I would be worried about the social determinants of health, which one friend of mine called the social determinants of death, because that's what they are. I would be thinking about what each and every person needs to feel safe, because ultimately this is about safety. And when you don't feel safe, you are not going to learn. We need to rebuild what school is and who we are. And this is our opportunity to be trauma responsive. If we cannot be trauma responsive after a global pandemic, shame on us, right? Shame on us. We have to do it. This is our time. This is our
Yeah,
time.
I love that. And it just reinforces all the conversations we've been having. Absolutely. We've been talking a lot about safety first and psychological safety and regulation and
You know that term, Maslow before you bloom,
yes.
right?
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah. We've been talking
Maslow
about
before
that.
you bloom. You have to regulate, relate, and then reason. That's Bruce Perry's work. You cannot.
Yep.
What kid or what human in the entire world has ever calmed down just because you told them to?
Yeah,
Doesn't work.
all the time.
Calm down. Cut it out. It doesn't work. And this goes for the kids, this goes for the teachers, this goes for all staff in a school. We've all lived through. I heard this great analogy. Somebody said, oh, we're all in the same boat. But the truth is, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. And some people are riding out the storm in a yacht. And some
Right.
people are riding out the storm on a buoy with their hands like clinging for life. And some people are in a rowboat and there's a hole in the bottom of the rowboat, right? Some people are in an inner tube clinging to life. So no, we're not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. And we all experience whatever this collective trauma is differently. And if we have had already a history of trauma, this really adds to our history, and it makes it even more challenging to manage this. If
Yes.
you come from a space of generational trauma and then you add COVID on top of it with no end in sight, um, and isolation and all the things that we've had to go through, it just, we have to recognize the degree of hurt, the degree of impact that we've experienced. So, yeah, that's what I would do. I would focus on how are you? How can we serve you? How can we help you? Um, what can we do as a community to heal?
That's a
What do we
great,
need?
I love that. And like Kathy pointed out in the chat, I think that we all know not only do we need to pay attention to this all the time, but we're all coming back with trauma.
All of us.
Teachers, the kids, the parents, the administrators, everybody is coming back with their own experience of this. And we can't skip over that. We have to do a lot of storytelling and healing and sharing and, you know, all of the things that you mentioned before. If we try to skip over it, it's going to come back to bite us in the you know what. So
I mean, we've already, you know, I had my evaluation yesterday. Really? I had to put together a portfolio.
yeah.
Thinking, okay. So
All right.
it was an interesting portfolio. And I get, you know, we all have to be accountable in our jobs. I totally get that too. But it's just interesting that we're trying to continue to fit our school calendar, what would normally happen in a school year, in a year that has no calendar. Every day is a day.
Right. Right. Yeah, but we're still trying to go through all of the same motions of teacher evaluation, staff evaluation, student evaluation, as if we weren't like we are. Yeah, that's a great point. Wow. Wow. Well, it is almost 1 o'clock.
I can't believe it.
I know, we've had so much fun. This has been fantabulous. Thank you for joining us. And I know Jenna put in the chat that you can follow us on ACEs in Education. We always put up blogs about when we're meeting again. I think we're going to meet once in December. I'll let you know what that date is exactly, because people asked unanimously last time. I said, do you still want to meet in December? And everyone's like, yes, we'll meet once in December. And then we'll come up with a schedule going forward after the holidays. Jenna, is there anything I'm missing?
I just wanted to give a shout out about the ACES Connection donation campaign that we're running right now. We have been so lucky enough to been offered a $50,000 matching grant. So we need to raise the money from ACES Connection members in order to receive the matching funds. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to our donation campaign. The donation is tax deductible if you're based in the US. And this is ACES Connection's first effort to try and fundraise from our members. So we're really excited about this.
Thank you, Jenna. Yeah, share it with all those donors, you know, folks. All right. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Robin. I always enjoy spending time talking with you. And I look forward to having you join us again sometime in the future.
I would love to. And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you.